Hello, my name is Doug Abrams, and thank you for joining us to speak with Desmond Tutu and Paul Tutu and Richard Branson today. We're going to be discussing forgiveness, and we're talking on the eve of the launch of the Tutu Global Forgiveness Challenge and the launch of the book of forgiving Desmond and Paul Tutu's latest book. We're speaking from California, Necker Island, and Southern Africa in Cape Town. Hello, Richard. Hello, Art. Hello, and Paul.
Hi.
Hi.
So our first question is for you, Richard. You have said that the Arch encouraged you to patch up your relationships and to ring up your enemies and make amends and fix things up. I was wondering, did you take his advice?
You have to take Archie's advice or you get into trouble. I've kissed his feet many times, and I'd rather not have to keep kissing his feet. I was brought up in a family that also believed in forgiveness, and I remember my father was meant to spank me because my mother asked him to spank me, and instead he clapped his hands very loudly and told me to run out and pretended to cry. And it's much more powerful than if he'd actually spanked me. So it's little things like that in your life that makes you realize that there are better ways than punishment, and there are more powerful ways sometimes, and forgiveness can be very powerful. And the Arch once sat me down and said, make a real effort, ring up anyone you've fallen out with. It could be a partner, it could be a business relationship, whatever, and you'll find that it will make you feel good, and it will be the right thing to do. And we just had a major court case with British Airways, which it was known as the Dirty Tricks campaign, where they were trying to put us out of business. And we'd won the case. And I rang up Sir Colin Marshall, who was the chairman of British Airways, and invited him out to lunch. And we had, it was wonderful. We spent the last 10 years of his life as friends. We did good charitable things together. If we just left it as a unpleasant court case and remained enemies, I think it would not have been as positive. And I have the Arch to thank for that and other occurrences that have taken place.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, that was I think that's a very telling story and a beautiful example of how powerful forgiveness can be in transforming a relationship. I mean, Arch, why do you think that it's so important to forgive, not only in our personal relationships, but also in the business context that Richard was just describing?
Well, for once, it is that when you do not forgive, you do something to yourself that all of us know. I mean, if you are angry with someone, your tummy tells you something. You get all these strange feelings, and so it's good for your health, your physical health, and then your spiritual health. That we are not meant to be knotted up because you are angry. When you let go, the repercussions for yourself are so tremendous. I mean, and they began to show, I mean, in experiments and things of that kind, that people who nurse grudges and so forth and so on, have stomach ulcers, and generally their health is not okay. It's not as okay as it could be. And when you do the opposite, which is to say you forgive, you open the door to all sorts of positive influences to yourself, so that it is a gift that you give to yourself more than actually you think in giving it to the other.
I wanted to just piggyback on something that Richard had said in his comment about British Airways. He said that you had done that the two companies had worked together very well in the past in philanthropic enterprises and in other kinds of enterprises, and to highlight the fact that forgiveness again opens the door for more creative enterprises that are not just good for the businesses, but are then good for the world as a whole.
There was a wonderful woman called Eva who was one of the Holocaust victims, and in fact she was experimented on in the Holocaust, and I found some words that she had said when she went to visit Auschwitz, which I think summed up very clearly what the arts just said. And she said, "Forgiveness is an act of self-healing and self-empowerment. It is a miracle medicine. It is free. It works. It has no side effects. Now, society expects revenge, but I personally do not want to live with pain and anger to the end of my life. And if she can forgive, having gone through the horrors of Auschwitz, I think pretty well anyone should be able to forgive."
Wow, that's a powerful quote. I think in the context of business, Richard, people often think that, may wonder whether forgiveness is a sign of weakness. And as a global icon of success and winning in business, where do you feel this? Do you feel that if someone were to say to you, isn't it weak to forgive? And isn't the goal to, if your competitor, like in this case British Airways, was trying to do you a bad turn, why isn't it a greater sign of strength to just destroy them and beat them in the marketplace?
Well, that wonderful laugh, we're going to have to bottle it somehow. I think forgiveness shouldn't be shouldn't be muddled with competition. I mean, competition is incredibly important for everybody, and companies should compete. And if they compete, then the public benefit from that. But there are many situations where I think a good leader needs to forgive. I mean, I once had a situation where a local record shop dealer, a second-hand record shop, rang me up and said, "One of your staff is bringing your records to this shop and selling them to us, and we think you ought to know about this." And actually, perhaps remembering what my dad had done to me, and there were one or two other occasions in my life as a child that something similar had happened. Instead of firing him, I got him in, sat him down, and said, best not to steal. Not a great idea. We'll give you another chance. And he turned out to be the best artist and repertoire person we'd ever had at our record company. He signed bands like Culture Club and I think even Peter Gabriel, who Arch knows. So he went on to doing fantastic things for Virgin, and never ever repeated that offence. I mean, he was appreciative that he had been forgiven, we have a program at Virgin for ex-convicts. We'll try to take on as many ex-convicts as possible. Now, not one of them have ever reoffended. They've appreciated the fact that they've been given a second chance, and that's obviously not just good for them, but it's good for society as well, because they're not having somebody breaking and entering into their home because they haven't been given a second chance, and so everybody benefits.
That's also another beautiful example of the role of forgiveness and transformation. I think one of the things that often gets in the way of people seeing forgiveness as an option for themselves, and this question is for you and Paul, is the fact that they see it as somehow in contradiction to justice. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, Richard just told that wonderful story about how, he didn't actually, in that case, he chose forgiveness over seeking what some might consider justice by firing the employee. But what do you think is the relationship between forgiveness and justice as you understand it, Paul?
Well, there are things. One, there are different Richard said take at my and the seeking.
We're getting a little feedback. Okay, are you hearing it as well?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you either. Suddenly.
So could you try coming maybe a little closer? Let's see if that helps at all.
Okay.
Much better.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes, better.
Can you hear better?
Yes, great.
I think if you and I both do that, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are two types of justice. One is retributive, which is sort of an eye for an eye. And the other is restorative, which says that there's an opportunity to create something new or create a new space in the community. I'm sure that just knowing that his crime was known was a challenge and a punishment enough for the person who stole, and that being given that second opportunity restored a balance of community in the context in which Sir Richard has described, but also to say that even when we talk about retributive justice, the murderer who is imprisoned for life is not outside the scope of forgiveness. That those who have been affected by that murder can still forgive the perpetrator. That doesn't short circuit even a criminal justice system that requires imprisonment. And in fact, we have a case here in South Africa of the Worcester bombings, where one of the young perpetrators of this bombing, in which several people were killed in around Christmas time, 1990. I don't know. But one of the perpetrators of that bombing is currently in Pretoria Central Prison. But some of the victims of that bombing, some of the people who lost limbs, lost eyes, have met with that perpetrator, and many of them have forgiven him. That doesn't change the prison sentence that he will have to serve out, but it does change the imprisonment of his heart and mind that he might have to serve out.
Interesting. Richard, did you have anything you wanted to add to Paul's comments about restorative versus retributive justice, or how that, it sounds like you chose restorative justice in the context of your employee.
Yeah, I'll give you one more story of my dad.
Great.
He had a drawer in his bedroom, and myself and my sister would occasionally go into the drawer where he left his loose change, and we had a sweet shop next door, and one day he'd left quite a big coin in that drawer, and we went and got a whole pile of sweets, and the lady that ran the sweet shop rang my dad and said, "I think you should come over here, Mr. Branson." And he came over, and we were obviously very worried, and he looked at me, and he didn't say anything. He looked at the owner of the shop, and he said, "How dare you accuse my son of stealing?" He then takes us out of the shop. He never says anything, and there's no way that I ever went into that drawer ever again. And so, again, that act of forgiveness certainly taught me a lot, and it's so much more powerful than the other way.
Yeah, it's also a powerful example of how it goes from one generation to the next. Beautiful.
Arch.
I mean, his face is not showing that he is speaking.
Yeah, he's frozen. I'm afraid he's coming in and out of being frozen. But we.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've never known Richard to be frozen.
Be frozen.
Fortunately, he has a fine face expression on his face. Sometimes it's not as flattering when it freezes. Well, I think this brings us to another interesting topic related to the stories that we're telling, which is the issue of apology. It sounds like your dad, in that case, I don't know, did you apologize to your dad after that happened, or it was just a kind of implicit apology, or how did that unfold?
I don't think I needed to. I mean, he could tell that that I knew what he knew, and that I was mortified. And so, yeah. I mean, I suspect maybe I should have said something. I was very young.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think apologizing is healthy, and I've definitely talked to him about it many years since. Whoa, sorry, something's blowing. And anyway, so we've sort of apologized.
So I think a lot of people say they can't forgive because the other person hasn't apologized yet. And so in the case of British Airways, I don't know if you didn't wait till he apologized. Did he ever apologize for what had happened, or what was the role of apology in that experience?
Yes, he did apologise, and I hope though that I would have rung him whether he'd apologised or not. But he was big enough to apologise, and they did a formal apology in court, but he also rang me and apologised. So I mean, I think that what's quite important about forgiveness is there's often, I don't personally think there was in the British Airways case, but there's often two sides to the story, and particularly when it comes to relationship issues, where people get divorced or people fall out with each other, and both people feel that quite rightfully, maybe in their own minds, that they're in the right, and you've just got to sort of cut through thinking that, and ring up your ex-partner and say, look, let's get together, let's become friends, and having done that, the benefit to your children or ex-children, or sorry, not ex-children, to your, if you were, all right, Arch, sorry, I wasn't ever very eloquent. Anyway, to the kids or to the family and the friends, it's just enormous. So so important.
But I mean, you're quite right, Richard. I'd forgotten that you are so smart. I mean, that I frequently have to sit at your feet. But yes, you are smart. But the other thing, I mean, certainly for us who are Christians, have a supreme example in Jesus, who as he is being crucified, prays for the forgiveness of people who have not asked for it. I mean, they are knocking their nails into his palms and into his feet, and he's saying to God the Father, forgive them, and he even finds an excuse for them, that they do not know what they are doing. Please forgive them. And he hasn't waited, because he would have waited until the cows came home. He hasn't waited until they make the move to ask for forgiveness. He has opened the possibility, and they now have to appropriate a gift that he wants to give them. He has given the gift. It is up to them to receive the gift.
And I think that said, that I am sorry are probably the three most difficult words in the English language to pronounce. Time and again, we are challenged by the need to say those words, whether it is as partners, as parents, as co-workers, as friends, to really say and to mean, I am sorry.
Yeah. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And yet they are the most powerful words. I mean, in opening up a potential that could so easily be dissipated. All of us, yes, I mean, do not find it easy to say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. And yet it is such a powerful key to unlock incredible possibilities. And when we do not take that opportunity, we all know the damage that it does to relationships and what it does to oneself. I mean, to walk around with the knowledge of having committed something wrong and being in denial is like a cancer, inside one, and it eats away at your vitals. As we pointed out, I mean, that forgiveness is in fact good for one's physical and emotional health, as equally unforgiveness, not willing to admit being wrong, can do the opposite. I mean, and have the deleterious consequences on one's health, physical and emotional.
I think that this only last month, the wonderful Iranian mother who interceded to stop the young lad Beilal being executed, and since then she has said how much it's meant to her, how much it's changed her life, how much she benefited from interceding and stopping him being hung, and those moving pictures of her hugging the mother of the killer, and it would just be wonderful if nations that execute people. I mean, to me, I think a civilized nation is a nation that, yes, imprisons people if they've done atrocities, but somehow I think civilized nations should not execute people anymore. And I think that was a good lesson to all uncivilized nations, that continue to execute people.
Where he pointedly.
Where are you, by the way, Richard? Are you close?
I think one of us is living in one of those uncivilized nations, at least one of us.
Isn't it just awful? I mean, to think that a judge in Egypt has sentenced 640 something people to death. I mean, even when you say you support capital punishment, I mean, 600 people just going to be mown down by the law. I mean, that is, I'm sorry, I have to say, it is abominable.
Seems actually barbaric.
Since we're talking, please go on, Richard. Yeah.
No, look, I think there'll be younger people watching this program who won't realise that Arch has actually he doesn't just speak these words, but he speaks them based on action, and that when apartheid finished in South Africa, he and Nelson Mandela got together and decided to set up the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And there are many countries that would have rounded up the white people who'd committed atrocities against the black people. They would have put them up against walls and shot them, or hung them, or electrocuted them. But instead, Archbishop Tutu presides over these courts where people come and apologize to their victims. On some occasions, they hugged the victims, but they basically apologized, and in that way they cleansed the nation. And of course, Arch did it with great compassion, the occasional humor, and South Africa has now become the rainbow nation. By no means perfect. But a wonderful example to the world. So forgiveness can not only help individuals, it can help whole nations if it's practiced properly. I mean, we've got the anniversary of the Hutus and the Tutsis, and there's a lot of them, people meeting up with each other and apologizing to each other as we speak. Northern Ireland, which was close at home to Great Britain, again, they've managed to overcome their difficulties. They're now, marrying each other, they're friends, and these things can happen. But you do need that forgiveness in order to make them happen.
Well, I wanted to just, while we're talking about nations, I wanted to look at the situation in Kenya, where the elders, which you, Richard, and you, Arch, have been very active, and you played a role in the kind of transformation of the violence and the fighting in that country. And I was wondering if you could say anything about the role of forgiveness, and did that play a role in moving from the violence there to a greater peace in Kenya?
I think this will be for Arch.
The persons who were deeply involved from the elders were Kofi Annan and Grasha. I went, having been invited by the churches. I had been for 10 years president of the All Africa Conference of Churches. And again, I mean, it is like you are telling people things that deep down they know, that it is actually better to turn enemy or potential enemy into friend rather than the opposite. And time and time again, when people do try to move in the direction of understanding, forgiving, there's a wonderful result. I mean, Kenya, like other countries, went and did in fact have a kind of Truth and Reconciliation Commission. We still have a lot, as it were, to answer for in terms of some administrators having used the differences in tribes, where they have, say, given considerable privileges to one group and not to the other, as in Rwanda.
Arch, could you move a little closer? Could you move a little closer? We're getting a little feedback. Could you just move a little closer?
Yes. Did you hear what I said?
We did, but there was a little feedback, so this is better. Yes.
That whether I should repeat. Thank goodness I don't have to repeat.
No, you don't have to repeat. No.
But I mean, it's awful when you get unscrupulous people using differences to exacerbate the feelings. As I was saying, I mean, in Rwanda, it wasn't just that the Tutsis and the Hutu had all of those rivalries and decided that they were going to clobber each other. But the colonial powers quite deliberately favored one group over the other. And part of why that genocide happened is that the group that had been clobbered and had suffered the discrimination were coming back, as it were, to get their own back. And it's, yeah, I mean, we have to realize that, I mean, people do not just generally sort of hate each other. I mean, there are rivalries between tribes, but in the case of Rwanda and Burundi, and as well as in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the colonial powers were very, very smart at dividing and ruling.
Well, do you forgive them much?
I will consider that.
Speaking of forgiving, you have the two of you have worked closely on the elders for much time, and we're pretty much at the end of our time together. So I wanted to ask if there's anything that you need to forgive each other for or apologize to each other for in your work together.
I want to say this. Let me get in my word first. Richard is often seen as flamboyant, and all that kind of thing. Now, he's really a great master at camouflage, because this man is actually, I mean, and when you tell people that, they won't believe you. He is a very shy person. Richard will have you, say, on Necker Island, and I have not met a more caring host who goes around and goes off and picks up food for you, and making sure that you are comfortable. And I just wanted to pay a very warm tribute to him, to say that he certainly is someone who has sought to make the world a better place. And it is he and Peter Gabriel, who thought up this idea of elders and said, we now have a global village, and in the global village, we need the equivalent of the elders in a traditional village, and went to Madiba and told this idea to him. And hey presto, now we have this remarkable thing called the elders. Look at him, he's blushing.
Arch, if I was there, I would obviously kiss your feet and love you as always, and thank you for your kind words. Do I forgive Arch for not learning to swim when we tried to teach him to swim? He ought to be able to walk on water as an archbishop, but he, as far as I think, all of us who know and love him dearly and love the family and everything he's achieved, he does walk on water as far as we're concerned, and just think that what you're trying to do in spreading the word of forgiveness is something which is magnificent, and may it overcome divisions all over the world. Anyway, lots of love to you, and thank you for your time, and see you soon.
Bye.
Cheers.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ampar. Thank you, Arch. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much.